Anytime. Welcome, everyone. I'm holding this mic so the folks at home and watching this later can hear. So just a word, if you want to be recorded and on your words saved for posterity, then speak into a microphone. So otherwise, you can just be informal and speak to the people in this room. My name is Robert Scher. I'm a member of the Select Board of Ashland, and I've been a member of the Upper Charles Trail Committee for probably 5 or 6 years, I think really from the beginning of this project. So as I think you're aware, this is a public forum focusing on Pine Lake and Voyagers Lane, which I think we had a very constructive meeting with your trustees about a month ago about the different alternatives and thoughts about the trail. And so the purpose of this meeting, and nothing is cast in stone, but we have been working for really many years on this. And I think if you came in and had a chance to look at the map, you'll see the proposed trail route. But that's what we're going to go over here. I think we're hoping to get, I'm sure the members of the trail committee, many of whom are here, will be happy to stay here for hours and hours. But I think we're pretty much going to wrap this up in about an hour, but with about a 10 or 15 minute presentation by Valerie. And so I just wanted to welcome you all here. Just briefly, I do want to just note that there are many members of the Upper Charles Trail Committee here. I don't know if you folks want to just raise your hand in case people want to ask you questions, to know who you are. I do want to note that Yolanda Greaves, another select board member, is here. Yolanda's been very involved in the trail for many years, very knowledgeable about it, so feel free to ask her about it as well. And Michael Herbert, our town manager, is here to add to the conversation, answer whatever questions you may have. Michael, did you want to say anything in general, just as an intro, or you want to hold off?
Hold off.
Okay.
You want to keep it an hour.
Yeah. So thank you, folks from Pine Lake, for being here. I don't know if you would, just a show of hands, how many people here from Pine Lake residents? Great. Wow, that's a great turnout. Thank you for coming. So just a quick overview before Valerie gets into her thing, that as you said, the Upper Charles Trail is really part of a much larger circuit.
That's in my thing.
Yes, no, I won't go on at length, but that is in effect now, and you'll see that when Valerie talks about it. And so what we're trying to focus on here is the Ashland section, and actually specifically our challenge is getting from the existing trail, which I think many of you are familiar with, on the what's called the MBT access road. And I don't know if it's the news is, well, it was at our meeting. It's probably going to be renamed Memorial Drive. Memorial Drive, is it? And, you know, as it ends at the lights across the street from Voyagers Lane, and the challenge is how are we going to get from there to the state park, which is, DCR is very interested in having us have a multimodal trail to the state park. So anyway, so after the presentation, we'll do Q&A and whatever is on your mind or any questions you may have. I think the best thing is to hold the questions until after Valerie's finished, unless there's a real clarification, like you just didn't understand something she said, and then we can get into it. So without further ado, I think we'll get into it. So thank you, Valerie.
You're welcome. So first of all, my apologies. I've been advised that Pine Lake is 2 words. I'm sorry. But anyway, I'm Valerie. I'm on the, I've been on the Upper Charles Trail Committee for Ashland since it started, and we've been working on this for a long time. But there have been people who have been working on the large circuit of the Upper Charles Trail for even longer. As I researched this, I discovered that the very first glimmerings of interest in this thing date back to 1986. So it's been a long time coming, and in the mid-90s and early 2000s, Holliston and Milford were working very hard on their trail. Milford kind of took off, Holliston then sort of caught up, and at this point, those 2 communities have really extensive trail networks. Oh, were you not hearing me? I was not talking to the mic for the TV side.
Valerie, should we turn the lights down, or what do you think?
Yeah,
Let me ask the.
Okay.
So
I titled this The Dream Big Picture because it's a dream that people have had, as I said, for about 30 years. And this map here is an overall concept map of the idea of what we're trying to do with the Upper Charles Trail. It dates to 2017 before we really got to work hard on the Ashland piece. So the red line there is just a general squiggle that says we've got to come and bring this trail from the Hopkinton side of town to the Sherburne side of town. We have no idea how that's going to happen. But we got to work. The select board set up the committee to work on this project and try to figure out if this was even remotely possible to create a trail across the town. The other communities all have disused rail beds and big wide open spaces, and they've been able to work it. And even then, it's very time consuming and difficult. Ashland, as some of you may have noticed at one point or another, has lots of hills and lots of water and no rail bed. So to try to figure out how to route a trail across, we spent a couple of years, just the committee, a year and a half or so, looking at maps, playing around with things, talking to the community members, trying to figure out what could possibly work. And we kind of honed a basic concept of what would work, but clearly we're not the professionals. So at that point, we did have some grant money that we used to bring in Alta Planning and Design, which is a well-known, nationally known trail design engineering firm. And they spent almost a year working on, I think I have the timeline there somewhere, but doesn't matter. They spent, when was it? All of 2017, basically, working on the same things that we'd worked on, and they came back at the end of that period and essentially validated most of the things that we had come up with and pointed out places where the engineering was just going to be impossible, where it was too steep or too wet or something, and gave us some tweaks. And then the plan was presented to the select board at the end of 2018, and they approved the general concept, obviously everything contingent on getting easements from property owners where we need to go through, and a lot of engineering work and a lot of money that has to come from grants from the town from various sources. So since that time, since 2018, we developed a Friends of the Trail group, which I would urge all of you who are interested in the project to join. We have a Facebook group and a mailing list, and the Friends group is already doing a lot of walks and informational material. Ultimately, they will be a fundraising arm to help with the small stuff. They're not in the league of raising $2 million to build the trail. They're in the league of raising money to maintain it, to put up security things where needed, to do signage, all of that kind of thing. And we've been working hard, the committee has been working hard on writing grant proposals and liaising with the town and trying to figure out where we'll get the money to do this and which pieces of the overall project would be the best places to start. And about the time that we were tackling that project, Michael and the rest of the town, the select board and so forth, worked out this great deal in the rail transit district that gave us a piece of land that we could go across to get from the rail transit district to the west, and more importantly, the Trolley Brook section of the trail, which starts about midway up the MBTA access road across from the middle school playing fields and heads east towards downtown and comes out at Magunko Road. And because that piece of the trail is already a trail and doesn't need much work, it needs obviously some engineering and paving and so forth, but it exists. And it will be a great showpiece, a great way to start the trail. It was decided that that's where the focus for the beginning of the project would be, to actually create some trail. It's also kind of the center section of everything, because the focus of the whole project is connectivity, is creating, as I say, their community through connections. We want this trail to be a way for kids to get between the schools safely. We want it to be a way for commuters to get to the rail stations. We want it to be a place for recreation, an easy way, good for public health, all of that. And the idea is to get people together around the project, and that central piece that we already have is a great way to start it. That piece, the Trolley Brook, connects beautifully with the MBTA access road, and ultimately there will be a way to go from that MBTA access road through or around the rail transit district headed west. But it seems to us that the most important thing to do at this point is to try to connect those pieces of it in downtown with the state park, which obviously is why you're all here. Sorry. Hello. I'm sorry. This is not very functional. Next. There we go. Did that. Okay. So this is where you come in. One of the most important pieces of this whole trail originally was the idea of connecting the town to Ashland State Park and ultimately also to Hopkinton State Park, because that's where we're going to connect with Hopkinton's piece of the trail. Not exactly sure where yet. They're working on that, but that's the idea. So the idea, one of the ideas is people can come in on the train or come in from all over Ashland and be able to get to both state parks and eventually connect from Ashland State Park around the backside of the trail to get east from there to get to Sherburne. For a while, it's going to have to be through the city, through the town streets. I'll put up a map in just a second. So the goal at this point is to figure out how best to make access to the state park, and the best way to do that seems to be along the very edge of the Pine Lake property. So we're coming to you tonight for support and to find out what we can do that would make having a trail run along the side of your community appealing and where you would feel safe and comfortable and make it a viable benefit to you rather than something that seems uncomfortable or scary. As you're likely all aware, there are already a significant number of people that cut through that area to get to the state park. So one of the things that we see a benefit on here would be to actually get those people who are informally coming through the community onto an official trail separated from your residences by a berm and trees and blockages of various things, and just keep that separation there to get past the community and down to the state park. We also are, there are lots of ways to mitigate trail connection and to put up quiet zone signs and things like that, so that everything would be on the table if this were something that that we can work out. There's a map of the big picture in the center of town. Obviously, you'll recognize your community there, and this shows where the idea is to have the trail on the far side of your main access road, and come down all the way to the very end and dip into the park where there's already an existing trail. But there's it's fuzzy exactly where it would go, and that is open to discussion. We also looked at several other general themes. We could bring it around the side where the red is, but that's very wet and very steep and more intrusive to more people in the community, or some combination of this, which would, like come through partway through the town, through the streets, but mostly on the side. Alta identified the black route there as the way that would be easiest to completely separate from the residences and have it be unobtrusive. And this is a detail of how the connectivity with the crosswalks work, they would likely have to put up good, better signalization and keep the this access here is off road there. Seeing this here, do people have questions about? Well, I've got the map on how that would work, or thoughts about it.
Yeah, I do.
If you want to be recorded, go up to the microphone.
No.
No, that's all.
Okay.
Oops. Yeah.
Because my question is at the intersection, I mean, in the milder weather, when kids are out of school and so on, I just can't conceive of the pedestrian traffic. I mean, if the traffic that you anticipate materializes, I mean, there are going to be people on this from other communities. It seems a little, and I'm not feeling it in terms of the intersection there.
Yeah.
I mean, as it is now, all of us wait at the stoplight to leave our own homes. So with I'm just thinking primarily spring, fall, foliage peeping, that intersection is going to be nasty. And you know, we've got a Y coming, it's going to be built in that vicinity.
Right.
So
Clearly, and that's factored in there. Clearly, the intersection needs a lot of work to make it safer for all. Either way, because you bring up a good point about the Y coming, because that will add yet more traffic to that intersection already. It's a good thing, but it's yeah. Yes, I'm sorry.
I guess I'm wondering why we're going through Pine Lake when you said that off the road they're going to go through the school properties, and why wouldn't they come out and enter the park at the normal entrance, just down the road?
Because there actually isn't any way to get from the school properties to the park normal entrance right over here without spending a lot of time on Route 135. We tried that, and it might be a temporary thing to use 135, but basically we want this to be an off-road trail everywhere, because it's all about safety. We want people on with strollers and rollerblades and walking and so forth, and nobody's going to do that on Route 135.
is this going to be paved?
In this section of it, it probably will be. There may be pieces, yeah.
Because I have several other issues to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Who is maintaining this? What about liability issues? What if someone falls and they're on our property? Are we going to be sued? Is it going to be lighted? Are there going to be hours?
Yeah.
I mean, are we going to have perfect strangers loving people? I'm sure, but they're going to be walking through our property at any hour of the
Yeah,
day.
I just want to, I'll paraphrase your question. So your question is about liability, because they can't hear you. But so any agreement with the town and Pine Lake, in places where it's on Pine Lake property, actually some of this route may not actually be on Pine Lake property, may be on President, yes.
Or
So
that's state property, correct?
no, that's also private land as well. We'll be speaking with them as well. But the way these trails work, there will be legal right-of-way set up with everything. So you would have no liability. That would be the thing that you would negotiate, and that would be put in place. So the way these typically work,
Negotiate this?
yes, with your management, whoever. So there'd be a legal agreement to hold harmless. That's typically the way these things work. It's a right-of-way agreement. So that's that would be. So
Yeah, I mean, lighting and maintenance.
you would be responsible for none of that.
None of it, no. You get all the benefit and none of the.
Val, are you? Do you have much more in your presentation?
No, I'm basically done. The next one is at time.
All right.
I've been at Pine Lake almost 30 years, and when the Dunkin' Donuts was built, we had very, very productive meetings with the franchisee.
Oh.
Well, if you notice, when you go by the Dunkin' Donuts, they have nice gooseneck lamps there, but we were very concerned about the folks who live at the bottom of Voyager's Lane. When there's no foliage in the winter, guess what? Hello, I'm in my living room.
So I'm just going to repeat some of your concerns. So you're concerned about lighting maybe affecting people's. So that.
This would be the
Yeah.
folks who live,
Sure.
space or open space.
So
across
let me just say, this is why we're having this meeting, to bring up these kind of concerns, and we would do our best to address all of these. Now, I'm not even sure, and I actually neglected to introduce Joel Arbeitman, who's the chair of the committee, who's very knowledgeable about the details. I don't think there's any answer as to whether or not there will be lighting at all on the trail. So, okay, so I'll
And the hours of the usage of it, that's a concern of mine as well.
The vision, now none of this has been finalized. Like, we're here to listen to you and address and maximize the benefit to the entire community and your community. For a path like this that goes into the state park, if it's like most state parks, I really haven't studied this in depth, but I think it's dawn to dusk. So when it's dark, nobody should be using that trail. I mean, it should have this, what applies here should also apply, what applies to the state park should apply here too. I mean, I don't see any reason to have any differentiation in what rules would be set. So my thinking, there is lighting. Well, first of all, we've worked on other areas of town and had discussions about the issue of lighting, and sometimes it can be a benefit to the residents themselves. Forget people coming in late at night or that kind of thing. To have low lighting where you're having, if you're walking along it, it can be a benefit, but it's not shining in your windows, or if there's some lunar eclipse at night or something, you don't have to worry about having all these lights around. It's just foot lighting, really. And that's the kind of discussion that we'd like to have. I just can't encourage you to get involved with this and come and share your thoughts with us. I just want to say our meetings are held the first Thursday of every month in the lower level of town hall, and everybody's invited, and everybody would have as much time to address any issues and concerns that you have. So, right now, it's a very difficult trail in that, unlike Milford and unlike Holliston, we don't have a rail trail here. So we're having to weave and work and make things happen. So our whole effort right now is very expensive, and that's where we're putting most of our effort in trying to raise enough funds to even build a section at a time. But issues like lighting or even the surface, I mean, this is not cast in asphalt. I don't know if that's there's no done deal here. I can tell you that when we met with officials from DCR who run the state parks, I was really surprised. I thought they were going to not want this unnatural surface in there. They were emphatic that they said, if you're coming in here, we want you to pave it with asphalt. So that's what you don't want to do on these trails is have a little bit of this and then a little, constantly switching. If it switches once or twice for a reason, that's okay, between a packed gravel surface versus asphalt. But here, I think we would almost definitely be putting asphalt, which is, if you continue up the Memorial Drive you went with, we'd probably keep it consistent with that. That probably would make the most sense. As far as this intersection, which is, what we're working toward right now is trying, the first step of all of this is to bring in professional engineers. I mean, we're bicycle riders, we're volunteers in the town, and we're going to look to them to provide the necessary guidance of how to make that intersection safe. My concern, because I run a bike club, I mean, we live with this stuff, is that right now they've created a very nice right turning lane coming down the hill if you're going toward Hopkinton. That just adds difficulty for bicycles and pedestrians, because the cars they don't have to stop at the light. They kind of whip right on through. So all of this has to get, that whole intersection may be redesigned. I don't know what is possible or what anybody's thinking is on it, but there needs to be a discussion about exactly that. Because, and the board has heard me say this 5,000 times. If it isn't safe, I don't want to be involved with doing it. And we're not going to build something that doesn't make sense where safety is a concern. So, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for that. So do people want to come up to the microphone and ask their questions? The microphone, or would you rather I just repeated it? Okay, go ahead.
Question over there, yeah. Over there.
Yeah.
Just basic, when you enter Pine Lake, it says private property.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be happening to our home values? We pay quite a high
late fee to be there. What's happening to all that?
Taxes.
So,
And tax rate.
so the trail is not, parts of it may not even be on the Pine Lake property. So in terms of, as you saw from the map, a lot of that, it'll just be, yeah, you want to bring that up again? So part of what we would want the riders to not really be in Pine Lake, to really just skirt the edges of it as per this trail. So, but, going back to the right-of-way agreement, and that would be negotiated, the idea would be to address any of those concerns. And the idea, as Valerie talked a little bit earlier, there would be possibly fencing or screening. So it's not like, unless the folks at Pine Lake wanted to have a gate or something, but that'd be up to you. But the idea would be the trail would be screened as it went along the side and probably into those near the tree line there, if you know what I'm talking about, along the side. So that's about what we're talking about. So the idea that would be,
How would they get to the park from?
well, do you want to show the trail again? Yeah, around.
What's at the back of our property?
Just here, I have a little pointer thingy here. So you're coming along there, and then at the very end, so there's an existing trail that comes out to this point here. So we would put the trail as far away from these houses as possible, and screen it again, so that it didn't mess up. You can actually even sometimes depress a trail so that the existing buildings can almost look over it and not even know it's there. So there are a lot of different ways to mitigate the existence of a trail someplace, screen it completely, or whatever worked best for you. We had a question
Yes,
here
I think
in red
this gentleman
and
in the back. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm very interested in how the trail goes from 135 down to the bottom of Voyager's Lake.
It go,
You show the other map, which is a close-up view.
So
That one,
the question is about the details of how the trail goes.
How close is it to our property line?
I took a walk down Voyager's Lane yesterday morning, all along the edge of the grass. There's a small part right after the stream as you're coming into the property where you could go into the woods and it's kind of flat. But very quickly after that, it turns very steep,
Right.
down into the gullies, into the woods.
Yeah, so,
And it becomes wetlands, not far the way down, and way down at the bottom,
Right.
it's very wet.
so the question is about,
There would be a place to be building a trail unless it was raised above the water.
right. So the,
For you would be, do you anticipate that this trail will come along the asphalt part of Voyager's Lane? Or are you suggesting that you might be building the trail along what is now the grassy part that comes along the edge of that asphalt?
right. So I think those are good questions, but I think we're a little ahead of the process because we have not gone on to actually establish through a survey where the actual boundaries are and do an engineering assessment of where the trail should go. So those are all good factors that would be, could dictate
rule it
where
out.
exactly it would be, but we're not, I don't believe, at a point to be able to say exactly where it would go. It might not even be on Pine Lake property in all significance. It could be on more to the President's Row side of things. But part of that would have to come through the engineering. Is that pretty much?
There is a lot of data that says that communities with trails increase in value. And I just wanted to say that relative to what's happening to the taxes and things like that. But if the town builds this right, it should be an amenity and bring value to your community, just like the rest of Ashland where it goes by. So that's all I wanted to say.
and we have another.
Sure. Well, let's see what.
Well, I don't know what the taxes are going to do. I just mean that your property values should not decline.
Well, I think maybe our town manager has something. Yeah, I see the questions. Maybe our town manager can address the concern about tax.
Oh, you're gonna give me the?
Yeah, the tax. So It's an interesting, so yeah, Michael, why don't you give us your impressions and perhaps address some of these concerns about taxes and.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. And I'll probably just rephrase them in a way that I could probably understand, and maybe it will make it a little bit simpler. I think a lot of the questions about the design and everything were really kind of caught in a chicken and the egg type of scenario here. What we want to do is we want to hear from you what your concerns are, and the things that you perceive realistically or unrealistically as problems, and then we hope to design a solution around that. So I think, again, it's the best way I can say it is more of like a chicken and the egg type of scenario, or chicken or the egg type of scenario. So we're going to be a little short on details of that right now because we're here to listen to what the concerns are. In terms of property values, I'm not an expert on this, but I can reinforce what Marty has said. Everything that I've seen shows that these actually increase property values. Now, there's three things that I really hear about that are concerns of communities with regards to any of these types of trails. Property values are number one, right? Safety. Is it fair to say that safety is another concern? Okay. And then also impact on the impact on the quality of life. I mean, nobody wants to be looking out their kitchen window when they're doing the dishes and, see Johnny Rocket and, on his bike, right? So there are ways that we can address that. There's ways that we could utilize screening. We could utilize the route to maybe minimize some of those impacts. Safety, I think, Joel's done a lot of research on other communities that have rail trails or bike trails, and has documentation of their police chiefs and their police personnel advocating on behalf of trails and how they are safe. I think Joel could probably explain that in a little bit more detail.
We have a nice clip even from them. We have a video.
I didn't do that I didn't set that up on purpose, but I just want to make sure before we get another question, is that kind of, number one, have I encapsulated what most of your concerns are? Okay. All right.
On the entrance of the property, we have a bridge. Are you going to use the same bridge?
No. Probably not.
Yeah, again, that goes to that whole chicken or the egg scenario. It's. I like bridges personally, but I don't know if it's the right solution here. So.
I have another question. Okay, let's assume this is built, and it's built on President's Row property. Okay, will there be access points all along this trail for people for egress? Let's say you're popping along, you're tired, you want to sit on a rock or something. Are there going to be, or is that another up to us thing? I mean, can people hop on and hop off of this trail?
Well, if folks have had a chance and to be on trails before, they're usually designed with amenities, and there's a whole process. And I don't know, I'll let Joel kind of describe how he visualizes that working. But if there's a design and people want to have a gate into it, that I wouldn't think that would be a problem. But that'd be something for the community to figure out. Joel. You get that queued up?
I don't have it queued up, but I can.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Give me the slide.
So I want to address this idea of benches and picnic tables and whatever else people could conceive of. One of the things that I would love to have the budget to do, I have two questions for everyone here. Has everybody seen a rail trail and been on one or walked on one or had some familiarity? So we have a little slideshow here where we can show you what it looks like. And not just what the trail looks like, but who are these people using this? Are they a bunch of, ne'er-do-wells, or are they just real people with kids and families walking along, teaching little kids how to use their bicycles? And you'll be able to see a real trail here. And I have hundreds of these videos I can show you. My personal, we have a committee, we have your community to talk about issues like benches and picnic tables and God knows what. If it's up to me, that's the last thing I would think you would want in your community. I would say, why are we doing that? Where we have a vision to do something like that. I don't know if people are familiar with what we've been calling the Trolley Brook Trail. If you go up the hill a little bit, almost up to where the middle school fields are, and you turn right there, that goes all the way down, more or less near Stone Park, give or take a little. And I would love to be able to see us build a deck like they built on Mill Pond near downtown Ashland that hangs out over the water. I've been on many of these bike paths all around New England, and it's the best thing to be able to stop with a picnic lunch or a snack, or just stop for a drink of water while you're out walking or running or biking, whatever. And that's where you do it, on a trail that's nowhere near residences. You don't want to encourage people hanging around and throwing litter and all kinds of things. That's not, if you guys came and said, well, we want a picnic area, which I'm sure you won't, then, we're open to anything like that. But I would really discourage it. This isn't the right place to put those kinds of amenities. And I did...
Just for members of this area, it's been like, no, I don't want to develop the green area.
Absolutely. Though I did want to say, to reiterate what's been said a little bit about property values. I suppose that somebody could find a case where property values were hurt by having a trail. I've never seen it. You go online and do research like that, you're going to see nothing but positive comments. We have a little video, if you want to stay for it, we can show. I like to tell this quick story. There was a guy, they have in Arlington and Bedford, and it goes all the way into Cambridge, the Minuteman bike path. It was one of the biggest. It is heavily used by commuters. And back in the early days, there was a guy who had a house on the trail who complained, safety and people from other towns. I mean, the comments are the same every time, and rightfully so. These are because you don't know. And this guy had a realtor. He was trying to move out of state, and he put his little for sale out there on the front lawn. And months, I don't know what the time frame was, but a long time went by, and he couldn't sell his house. And one day he said, I'm going to move that sign on the trail side of the fence. And the house sold, I don't know whether it was a day or two, whatever, but it sold immediately. Why? Because people want to be on a trail where they can have this amenity right there for them. Joggers, moms with strollers, teaching little kids to ride, having kids commute to the local school system or get downtown to the farmer's market, what have you. So it's a huge advantage. And it's hard to get specific numbers. I mean, the general average, they talk about a 5% increase in property values for trails. But I'm sure each situation is a little bit different.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you. I think we're going to, I think we're going to run a little short clip. This is the Milford Police Chief, Valerie.
You have it?
Yeah. So we got a short clip here about his comments on the Milford Trail.
I want you to watch the way the trail is designed and built, the people who are using it, get a feel for it. And this is a real video of real people with everything.
And this is part of the circuit that we're adding to.
This is Milford.
Very right.
Mike Larson, and also president of the Friends of the Milford Upper Charles Trail. I'm here today with a special guest. I have Tom O'Laughlin, Chief of the Milford Police Department, here with me. Chief, thanks for being here today, Mike. Thanks. So here today we're talking about some of the public safety aspects of the trail and some of the questions that came up when the trail was first proposed and developed years ago. Were there any questions or concerns from the neighborhoods, people whose property abut the trail or anything like that came up years ago?
rightly so, there were concerns of people that abut the trail, even people from the neighborhoods that were close to the trail. When you're attracting a number of people into an area that customarily you didn't see that number of people.
That's right.
So they expressed concerns of, potential criminal activity and how it was going to be monitored and who was going to be out there making a difference.
Yep.
And it put us in the position of assuring them that not only would we be present, the police, but also the residents of the community.
Yeah.
So, the fact is, it's you and I and the other residents of this community that make a difference every day in notifying the police when they see that something is just not right.
Right. If you see something left on the trail, or if you see
It catches your attention, or some activity that just doesn't look right,
someone loitering around a parking lot,
people make the phone call.
yeah. Were any of the concerns that residents had raised, did they pan out in any way, or were any of those concerns realized once the trail was built?
Actually, no. Quite to the contrary.
Yeah.
All the fears of, this crime wave, fears of things escalating or problems developing, I just didn't realize they didn't happen. And much of that is to the credit of the neighbors, the abutters, of the people from those neighborhoods.
Right.
Each and all of us that live in the community that utilize the trail and view it as the gem it is. I mean, it's a valuable asset to this community.
Absolutely.
And highly used, as you know, as a person that uses it quite often.
Right.
And so as a result, I think working closely with the Friends of the Trail,
Yeah.
You're the president, so you see, we have officers that attend the meetings. We listen to concerns. We work closely with the Friends of the Trail. We work closely with the Park Department. We patrol the trail. We have motorcycle officers that move about town, and they're up and down the trail checking on things. So I think it's an extremely safe environment. And no, I've not seen any of the concerns that were raised.
That's great news. Great to hear, because anytime you get any sort of attraction to a town, to a point, or any sort of gathering, there's always something, a chance of something like that's going to happen.
It's the fear of the unknown. And and change creates that. So, as we know in our lives, you introduce crane, we fear what's coming because we don't know what's coming in some respects. But this concern that people were coming from other communities and there were going to be issues, we didn't see it. As you know, we've connected our trail to the town of Holliston.
Yep.
They developed their trail. We're ready to connect to the town of Hopkinton.
Yep.
There are other communities beyond that. And they've had the same experience. We've communicated with them on our approach. As you know, we created a bylaw with regulations.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't find one anywhere in the country, so we sat down and working with Reno Bacci and other people in the community, we did just that. So that fear of people coming from somewhere else and doing things that were wrong, just that too hasn't happened.
Right.
Okay, Valerie.
So it goes on like that for a long time.
Okay. All right,
We can
so-
happily email it to anybody that would like to see the rest of
Right,
it.
so I think you get the idea of that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just the person who loves trails. I'm using it and I'm exploring it. But, and the presentation was incredibly nice. One thing that I cannot see in this presentation, it houses the people who live on the trail.
I see, yeah.
I just love to see it, but I don't need to watch everything from my window all day. I don't want to my dog barking all day on the people.
I see, okay. So I think your question was what are the houses like on the trail that we just saw? Well, I think there are some, Joel, you want to, and again, we've talked about screening and distance. So those.
No distance. I know my house is.
You're one of those.
On this trail, and
okay.
I know very well the distance between the road and the distance.
Yeah, I would just remind you we don't actually know where the trail would be. Okay.
It's no distance at all.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
In designing our trail, if we could be 10 miles away from everybody's house, that's where we would want to put it. In being a trail user, I use trails very often. And when I use a trail, and I think this is true for everyone, the last thing you want to do is hear barking dogs, and the last thing you want to do is be looking into somebody's kitchen window. Somebody used the expression. The goal for trail users is to be in the most natural settings you can be. So our goal is to, if we can do it, is to move the trail as far away from residents as we can get it. The second part was talked about before, which is that we have all kinds of things that can be done. Some of the houses along the Holliston and Milford Trail, that it's literally their backyards. I mean, the house might be, whatever it is from the backyard of the property, the back line, maybe 60 or 100 feet or whatever it is, and they put extensive fencing in there. You can do plantings, you can do fencing. We can do earth berms where the ground is.
For me, better to see the fence than the trees.
You'd rather see, I didn't hear. Trees, yeah. So like that. I mean, it could be planted all along. Well, I hope not. I mean, we don't want to be doing that. The other thing I wanted to talk about, this was raised before, is the wetlands. That's a major problem. And if you look at what developers have done over time, the last thing they want is to hit steep slopes or wetlands. I mean, it's expensive for them to have to build, if they can even build at all on that. Well, guess what's left at this point? I mean, the parcels that are remaining to build on in Ashland are becoming wetter and steeper and rockier and so on. What we're looking at in different parts of town, and maybe around the back, where this proposed route would go around the back of your whole condo. It's pretty wet back there. This gentleman was talking about how much wetlands are back there. Is that it's extremely possible that we may need a section of boardwalk. So instead of just having the trail the way you saw it here, you may go up on a boardwalk that would have, railings on either side, and that's how we would try to get over the water area or the wetter area. Well, as far as funding, that's a whole other topic. But basically, right now we have 2 funding proposals we're working on. And we're really looking at doing this right now, a section at a time. One of the proposals is to something called the Mass Trails Grant. So we've put in to do engineering of the Trolley Brook section, which is the part that comes down and hits the MBTA road up just past Dunkin' Donuts and goes over toward Stone Park. And then we're also working on a grant application to the Community Preservation Committee. We have the CPA fund that's for recreation projects and outdoor projects like this. That's one of its uses. And we're hoping to do some funding there. These sources are probably not going to be adequate. I mean, it will take us 500 years to go a half a mile at a time, which is what we're doing right now. We want to get something in place so people can experience it and understand the value and the payback to the community. The longer term, it's very likely we're going to try to go through Mass Department of Transportation, I guess it's called, and they have something called the TIP. It's like this competitive program that you get on. And it can take forever. Right now, the town is trying to redesign and rebuild Route 126 over by Market Basket. And I don't know how many years. We waited a lot of years to get on there. 5 years, Yolanda says. So, the longer-term plan, the good news is that's a big jackpot of money that we can try to apply for. It's very competitive, and it takes a very long time. But that's the longer-term funding vision. So right now we're just trying to get something in place, and then we'll work toward a more long-term funding plan. Yes.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Daily maintenance.
Good.
Who takes care of that? What would be the effect of increased maintenance beyond the trail, maybe throwing trash over? That's
Great question.
Ashland, who takes care of that?
Okay.
I'll get you my second one.
Okay, so I'll just want to repeat so they can hear on the recording. The question was about trash and maintenance and upkeep of the trail itself. In this video that we didn't see the entire video of. And again, we're happy to make all of that available. If you want to try to find the right way to communicate with us, we can give you a link where you can hear them discussing in Milford exactly that. At first, it was something of a problem, not significant, but it wasn't good either. People would throw trash or walk their dogs and not pick up after them, and there were all kinds of issues. It's a real thing. I mean, that if it's nobody's job, the last thing we're going to do is ask you to let us come in and then have you clean it up. I mean, that's not how we want to do business. We have a Friends of the Trail group, which is really rapidly growing, that was talked about. Tony Lewis over here is a member, and Valerie is a member. And
Judy.
June. These trail groups have already been out, not in your neighborhood, but along the Trolley Brook Trail, cleaning it up, raking it, smoothing it out. There were all kinds of, it was just a mess before. Now you can take a walk up there. It's really very nice. So it is this volunteer organization. They have a 501c3 certification. They can accept fundraising donations. They may at some point even have equipment of some kind, like a cart that they can bring through. In Milford, they put in these doggy bag stations where you can get trash bags to pick up after your dog. And that's the kind of process that we would hope we would be able to do. I just want to tell you that, this is my own statement, but I think everybody on the committee feels the same way. We feel responsible for this trail. We're looking to, this is not government trying to impose a solution here. We're trying to work with, and it's not just your community. We've got plenty of other areas in town where if we value what this could do for Ashland, we have to find a way to make it work and make it work well. Imagine that we put a trail in and you're screaming at us and it's a big mess and it's safety problems and the lighting is shining in your house. This is not how we want to go forward to other areas of town. We're trying to do something that this police chief referred to their trail as a gem. In one of the interviews, the interviewer said that they took a poll of the Milford residents. The question was asked, this was in their patch newspaper, they call it. And the question was, what if you were bringing somebody, a visitor came to see you, where would be the place that you would most want them to see in your town? And his statement in the video is overwhelmingly it was the trail. And that's what we're hoping to build. So the answer is that we see it as our responsibility to make damn sure that the trail is kept clean and safe, both. It's not good having broken glass along it and all that type of thing. So we hope to have an infrastructure that would attend to this.
Is that a daily maintenance? Is that a weekly maintenance? Because again, we're within the woods where there are animals.
Right.
So again, to me, that's
Well, given that we don't have any trail yet, I can't really address how it's going to work. The intent would be, to do it as often as needed if we have the resources to do it, which we would hope to have. We're trying to amass a community's worth of volunteers. The Scouts get very involved in Milford, especially. That they have adopt the trail section or that type of thing. There's a lot of people who value this and use this. And, the hope would be that it would be a pristine environment. That's the goal. Question 2.
So if this gets approved, construction site, how does that affect us? Are we going to have bulldozers on Voyagers for how long? Is it going to be on the other side?
What we're doing right now on the Trolley Brook Trail is we're hoping to get the engineering and surveying started in the next week or two. When that's completed, we would put it out for bid and hire a construction company. The real answer to your question is that obviously the goal would be to minimize any impact on anybody, certainly on your community. I have no idea. I can't speak to what is exactly involved in the construction because we just haven't done any of that yet. Again, the commitment is we're trying to minimize the impact, but I have no idea.
on the planning board, we've dealt with a lot of construction issues like this for larger projects. And one thing that to always keep in mind is construction vehicles aren't allowed to park and make use of property unless they have permission to use that. So if we get permission to put the trail through, that doesn't give them permission to operate outside of that area. And if that was needed for construction purposes, that would be something we would have to negotiate with your board and reach an agreement on. Generally, I think in most of these types of trails, there's a 10 to 20 foot wide easement where the trail is put through, and the people building it would not be expected to go outside of that area.
Thanks. As you can see, we have a number of we have some expertise here, both people on the trail. I do want to say the President talked about the width of the trail and it being asphalt. That's all subject to agreement and negotiation. Some parts of the Milford Trail, or especially in the Holliston, are gravel if you've ever been on it. But of course, they have the advantage of working on an old train line, so it's very wide. But that's all subject to agreement about what is suitable where. Yes, sir. Yes. Oh, okay. I thought you had a question. Yes.
More questions we can ask?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. Yes. Did you questions?
I was just curious. Will all the members of Pine Lake vote on this, or who is going to be determining whether this occurs?
Well, my understanding would be the trustees, but I mean that's really something that has to do with your own organization. I'm not sure we could tell you definitively that. So I don't think any of the trustees are here tonight, but we did have a and I think it was their suggestion to have this meeting. They helped arrange it. So, but I'm sure they'd welcome your input from this meeting, and you folks would be discussing how that would work. I don't think we can answer that question about. My understanding, it's an agreement of the trustees, but I'm not sure if that needs an association vote or what. Yes, Leslie.
You know me. I just wanted to say, when I heard about this, I think it was the New York
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Ashland Day, I think you mentioned it. Naturally, my imagination ran amok, worrying, because
yes.
I'm 75 years old, I live alone in this place, and I chose Pine Lake because I wanted to feel safe. I was next to a state park, and I wouldn't have to worry. I've lived here 17 years now, and I'm now anxious about this. I mean, I'm happy to hear your presentation. It sounds like, if there was some sort of fencing or some sort of screening, that's a good thing. But when I read about rollerbladers and bicyclists and people with dogs, and I started just getting anxiety attacks over it. I have a sister who's disabled who lives alone on the property, right down that end where this would be. We have packages delivered to our house. I mean, I just think of all of them. We won't know who's going to be wandering off that trail, or, do they even belong walking on our property? We kind of know who lives on our property. And it's that anxiety that worries me. And there are a significant number of us single women living on our own, and that's security. So it's nice to hear that policeman in Milford, although that part of the trail didn't show any homes that we could see. And I wondered about other towns. Do they have communities like ours? And what has been the feedback? How close have they come? Just to get a feel for it.
Sure.
Because it is a lot to consider. It was the reason I moved to this place. I used to live on Mountain Gate Road, and that had hundreds of townhouses, and I wanted to move to a small community to feel safe. And that's really where my
Well, thank you, Leslie. And I think we all understand what you're saying. Those are all good points and the things we're trying to address here tonight. And I know, that I lived there for 3 years, and I certainly appreciate how unique it is. I think one of the things that strikes me these are very specific questions, and I think Joel is willing to follow up with maybe specific examples from Milford to show where the houses are and how that works, and to address some of those. The other thing I think there are a number of people, is my understanding, going through Pine Lake now, and I think the question is, do you want to try to assert a little control over that traffic that's coming down Voyagers Lane and into the woods? And that will probably increase. If we do nothing, it will increase anyway due to the development in the area and the fact that people want to get to the state park. So I think one of the ways to look at this is proactively dealing with some of the issues you're raising, having people on a trail, having either fencing or visual barriers, or maybe the trail is a little further away than we're thinking, because there is some room there. So, hopefully we can, as Michael was saying, address these kind of safety concerns. And these are concerns that are not unique to you, and I'm sure everybody has. So I was just going to suggest to Joel, if you maybe follow up a little bit with some of these more specific. I think the concern is about where houses are on the Milford Trail and in other places. I know, for example, I've seen developments. They basically build gates, and there's one in Holliston, and you can see if you go on the trail. They've got a nice little gate from their development going into in a little gazebo there, I think, if I remember right. So there's a lot of examples of developments that live very well with a trail near them and do have barriers. You don't go off into the development, you go by it. So I don't know, Joel, if you wanted to.
I just want to make one quick comment. I don't know if anybody's interested in this, but I would be very, very happy. It's a nice walk, even if you're not researching trails, to meet you. I don't know if anybody knows where in Holliston the CVS is. That's kind of one of the key locations of the trail. It'd be easy to find it, or we can get you directions. And we could take a walk for 10 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it is. And as you go west from that location near the CVS, you're essentially paralleling Route 16. That's what the Holliston right-of-way where the rail line had been is doing. And as soon as you start walking west, you're in backyards. I mean, they're just right there. You can see for yourself. We might even, if we're lucky, there might even be people out there and we can go talk to them, which would be a great way to get a sense of what their reaction to living what the trail is and what, how do they feel about it at this point. What I was told by the chair of the Holliston committee, that this guy worked for over 20 years to build the Holliston Trail, is that many of the residents were like this, gee, I don't know, I'm a little concerned. I mean, I think these are absolutely valid concerns. I mean, I wouldn't, you don't know what the change is going to bring. And he said some of those people have become his strongest advocates at this point. It's anecdotal, but maybe we could find who these people are and you could talk to them or get some feedback. Yes, sir. Back here. Yes, sir.
So I just want to speak to the issue you raised, which is people walking through the property, which has been an issue.
Right.
And looking at your proposed map, I think there's an issue there as well, in that people are going to come down the rail access road, cross 135, cross Voyagers to get to your trail. People are going to figure out they can get to the park faster by walking down Voyager and up Treasure Way to the trailhead, right? And cut a lot of time off that walk. So I think you need to think about that because they may be taking shortcuts through our property to get to the park faster.
Right.
And so to save time, it might actually increase the number of people we have coming through. And that's not a theoretical concern. We've had issues going on through the years. And we had people parking up on Voyager in front of the railhead, put up a no parking sign, they took it.
Nice.
It got really bad for a while. So I just want to point that out. Yeah. People will figure that out and it could have the opposite effect.
What they've done in Holliston, and signage gets you partway. There's not a cop standing there with a loaded gun saying you will go over there. But if you went out on the Holliston Trail, what you'll see in many sections where it is closer to housing is please respect our neighborhood, please maintain quiet. It is so quiet there. I mean, you will never hear somebody shouting. I guess a dog barks on there if it sees another dog or something, but it is really quiet. And, the backyards are clean. I mean, you can go there and look for yourself and see how it's maintained. It's really pretty nice. Yes, sir.
I have seen those signs, and I have taken my bike and I've biked through trail from Holliston into Milford.
Great.
It was a really enjoyable time. When I bought into Pine Lake, I liked the wooded nature of the property.
Yeah.
It's very quiet and it's very private. And you have the amenity of the trailhead where we can just walk into the park and go down to the beach, go down to the dam and enjoy the natural setting.
Yeah.
If there was a rail trip, if there was a trail
Right.
that was down, that I could take my bike on, go down the hill, and get out to that trail and go through the park and over to Holliston or Sherburne, that would be really good, in my opinion. To me, that would be another amenity.
When we talked to DCR, we said, we'll do anything if you guys will let us come into the park. We wanted to go over the dam. And we didn't expect that they were going to allow this. And they said, oh no, this would be great. I mean, this is the purpose of state parks. And I said, well, I've got one trail route that would go all along the water, the whole Ashland Reservoir, all the way down to like where the boat launch is. Wouldn't that be neat? I mean, I would love that. And they said, no. You will. They actually told us, I can't figure out what they're talking about, but they said to us that they're using, well, you guys, your trustees had referred to the upper trail and the lower trail. So I guess they're currently using the state park when they have to do maintenance vehicles. I don't know that they're coming through Pine Lake. I'm not clear. Now, I think there's another road back there at the end of the upper trail that goes out through some guy's driveway out to 135. So maybe that's what they were talking about.
Oh yeah, I wound up on that guy's drive.
Yeah, it's quite a.
I don't know if it's okay or not, but yeah, you wind up right next to his house.
Right.
Right into the dam.
Correct. So, as part of the engineering here, this is what Rob was talking about. You know, the property, the amount of land that, I'm no surveyor, but the amount of land that Pine Lake owns off the road toward President's Row is not very much land. It looks like it's, I don't know what it is, maybe 15 or 20 feet or something like that. It's not a lot. And as was alluded to before, we may actually, if we can get more into the woods and be away from your neighborhood and away from President's Row housing, that would be great. We just don't know yet what the possibilities are there. And it's possible that it may meander back and forth across the line due to boulders or wet areas or whatever. I mean, this is further than we are at this point to answer these questions. Yes, sir. Right. Yes, we looked at that. It's pretty wet back there, though, right? Right. And our goal really was to get to the dam. We wanted people to have the view of the water there. We looked at alternatives. We looked at cutting through President's Row and going up Metropolitan Avenue and like that. Milford's trail is 99.5% off-road. Holliston's trail is 100% off-road. And in keeping with the character of that, when you send kids out or families out or people who are not road cyclists who are used to cutting through traffic and weaving in and out on the roads, we as much as we're able to, we're trying to keep the focus on the scenery, have it be away from cars. Somebody said, wouldn't it be a lot easier if you're trying to hook up to Hopkinton to just come down 135? Why don't you just put bike lanes in? Well, that would work. We could do that. But this is not what we're trying to create here. We're trying to create something that's safer for people and not how many people are actually, certainly nobody's going to walk down in a bike lane, or kids on little bicycles or whatever. So, the goal is to be off-road. That's what we're trying to. That's what's helping us determine the route. Yes, ma'am. So what are the definitive answer of what we're doing right now is we are hopefully again in the next week or two going to start the engineering for the Trolleybrook Trail that hits the MBTA road up near the middle school ball fields. If we're able to complete that in a couple of months or 3 months or whatever it is, we're hoping that we could actually do construction on that half-mile section of trail later this year. That would be the optimal situation if we're able to achieve it. If we are able to get that far, our goal would be to come in next spring or even sooner if we had funding and look at engineering the section we're talking about today, followed by construction. What's the timeline? I would say maybe sometime next year if everything went really, really well.
Is there a construction schedule for the other trail?
No, again, because we haven't done the engineering yet, the engineering will come up with construction plans. How deep down does the base have to go with gravel and rocks, and how is it exactly, or is it going to handle whatever slopes there are? So the engineering comes first, and then we will have a plan for the construction.
So I'm actually an architect by trade, and I work for a developer.
Great.
I want to understand how the schedule works, and I would imagine that at this point there would be some vague idea as to if you were to start construction, roughly how long it would take, and I think that might make people feel a little bit better about how our community is going to be impacted, because even if you're not actually on our property, it's still right there. You are going to hear construction, the trucks will be parked either on or nearby. And I think, I'm probably the sole representative of my demographic or generation, but I hear killing us. But I moved in not too long ago, and I actually also moved in for the same reasons that a lot of people here live there, is that it's quiet, it's private, we have access to the park, and I think it is a fair concern to say people are worried about trash being dumped over a mess. The fence could be a solution, but what is that going to look like on our side? Are you going to disrupt wildlife when you do that? Kill trees, etc. So I feel like visuals would be very helpful the next time. There are options. Nothing is set in stone, but
That's the type of thing that we're hoping will evolve from the engineering process, to have them guide us. I mean, I can tell you, like in Milford, they put in just regular, I don't know how high it is. I'm thinking it maybe is an 8-foot stockade fence, and that goes along. There are sections that were in this video here, very nice, very thick post and rail fences with, I don't know whether they're 8x8s or what it is, I think they look very nice. That doesn't give you the visual blockage. It just kind of is more of a routing kind of fencing, to keep people from not paying attention. Even bike riders, they're on these trails and they're not paying attention and they go into traffic or something like that. I mean, there's a value to having fencing there for that reason. So I would hope the details would emerge from the engineering process to, show us the pros and cons and have you guys involved in the process of, how much screening do you want? You want 100% screening so the trail just disappears, or, something in between? I think that's a discussion, that's a future discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the things I want to add in terms of the town-wide approach is that we're still in the process of obtaining rights of way, and actually, so when you're doing, we have selected certain sections such as Trolley Brook that the town controls. That'll be a good example of a trail. So, but we're also, in terms of looking at some of the other sections, we have yet to establish right away, and that's really the phase that I see us in, except with some exceptions. And then from that, we get into the technical review, such as really looking at the property and where is the best place. But that would happen after there's some kind of at least agreement for access to the property for the beginnings of that. So that's the best, I think, in terms of addressing concerns about construction. We're really, in my opinion, a ways off from that and really in the right-of-way phase. And that's in the informational phase, which is talking to folks like you about potential routes and where we want to go. So other questions?
Where is the money coming in for the engineering?
Well, as I think Joel was alluding to, it's a long process. It would be either a combination of town funds, state funds, grant. He talked about TIP, talked about bond funding. It's a year-long process. But as you may have heard, that these multimodal trails are very popular, and we're building a lot of them throughout this state and throughout this country. So it's going to be a difficult years-long process, but the funding, we hope and trust we'll be able to get the funding for it. But right.
We just started work at our last town meeting. Mr. Herbert and I discussed this the other day. We said on our police department and our fire department, there's no place for women to go to the bathroom.
Right. So we're building a public safety. So yeah.
50 million of the 54 million was coming from the state. Everybody applauded and voted yes, and 2 weeks later, sorry, 50 million.
So
now it's a voodoo fund that's going to come from somewhere that I still don't understand. And we have to.
All right. Well.
And we have to have.
No, it's a good point. So to get to your point, which I think you're questioning the viability of funding, all this would have to be approved at town meeting or by vote. But I don't see this as competing with some of the important projects you're talking about, because we're talking about years in the future. Yeah.
So nobody here except for that young lady who's going to be here to enjoy the trail.
All right. So your point is we should keep moving quicker. Is that it? So anyway.
I live on Treasure Way, and years ago when my kids were young enough, they would have loved living on Treasure Way and skateboarding right down that road. And now I have nightmares about kids coming down.
Well, let's get them off Treasure Way and onto a trail that's been engineered properly.
That are perfect for skateboarding.
Yeah, all right.
And there's lots of cars and multiple cars that shouldn't even be there that belong to the.
All right. I think all good concerns, which we will think about.
The value of our condos going up. That's wonderful. I was at a Board of Assessors meeting the other day and found out that, and I don't know how many people here know, that our tax bills, which we just paid the first quarter on, our tax bills went up higher than private houses went up. Condos are taxed higher in this town, including Pine Lake. So how much more can we squeeze out for the fences, for the soundproofing, for the pea stands?
Well, you understand that it's not something that the owners there would be charged.
And I know it's good to be planned. And I'm for it. This is great. This
Okay.
is beautiful. And I've seen other pictures of areas in these towns that are built along old railway
Sure.
tracks. And it's lovely. And I wish we could have all this stuff. And I wish we could have bathrooms for the male policemen and the female policemen.
We're working on that. Okay.
Policemen and for everybody.
All right. I want to give other folks, thank you. I just want to give some other folks a chance. Yolanda, did you want to comment on? Yeah, do you want here? And I can also bring the microphone over to other folks if you'd like. So.
I'll come stand over here. So first of all, our female officers do have bathrooms. They're just in a trailer. So it's not like they can't. Well, it's you hear things and then it gets perpetuated. Our female officers do have a place. Is it the best place? No, which is why the public safety building is looking at moving forward. It was originally $25 million that we thought we'd get from the state. That has changed. And so we are moving forward, but it's going to be your input, and all of you as voters will have that decision. In regards to the funding for projects like this, as a member of the select board, we all sort of pick projects or pick the types of things that we are interested in, that we try to foster and get more knowledge about. And one of the things that I've worked on is transportation, infrastructure, and getting different funding for our town in grant money, either from different organizations or from the state or from the federal government. So the TIP program, the Transportation Infrastructure Program, which is a federal program. So as was said, our Route 126 project, which if you've only been in town a short time, you might not be 100% aware of it. It is going to be a $16 to $17 million project. The full route of Route 126 is going to be reworked. There's going to be multimodal paths on both sides. There's going to be new greenery. And that is one of the first steps in working toward improving and preparing our community for the ability to support trails like this. That is federal dollars, your federal taxes, coming back to our community to improve our community. And this project, I've been a supporter of trails. I use the Milford Trail a fair amount. I love going down to the Cape and using the trail, the rail trail there, if you've ever gone on any of the trails in the Cape. And I think, I always come to these meetings to listen. I'm not on the trail committee, but I support what they're doing and I applaud what they're doing. But it's important to hear what you're thinking. So as someone who uses trails, and the concerns that I'm hearing, those concerns, they're valid. But if you were to talk to someone who uses a trail on a regular basis, they are not trying to go into your communities and into your area and disrupt you. If they're on the trail, they're looking to use that trail to get from point A to point B and make it as enjoyable for themselves and to not disturb your communities. We didn't watch the whole thing from the Milford police, the police chief. We hear from people, we are concerned about safety. Every research is showing that if there is a trail, many of the concerns that you are addressing never come to light. The Holliston Trail, similar thing. If you walk that trail, you are in people's backyards. And none of the issues that they had brought forward have come true for Holliston or for other communities. This is probably the first discussion. Leslie, I hear your concern, so I would be willing to sit and talk to you. Anyone else, if you have other concerns, I know we're trying to keep aware of time. But where I wanted to really address was some of the funding. If you drive on Route 9 from Natick, and as you head down Route 9, there's the Panera and the Stop and Shop, and there's the intersection that takes under 27. From there, you keep heading toward Framingham. There used to be a rail bridge that crossed the road. That is gone now. That is going to be part of their rail trail. That is being paid for by this federal tip money as well as some state grant money. Right now, Massachusetts as a state is very supportive of these multimodal trails. MAPC, which is our regional planning organization, has a project going where they are looking at how can we connect. So we have the Upper Charles Trail, there is the Minuteman Trail. Thank you, that's the one I was thinking of. There's the Bruce Freeman Trail. These are all trails that are being worked on, and what was that? Mass Central. Mass Central Trail, a little further west. These are all trails that are being worked on that the state is looking at grant money, which, remember, a lot of grant money is your tax dollars coming back. So for me, and I think members of the committee, is we will use some Ashland tax dollars that are spent, that are raised here, but how can we bring other grant money in to help support these projects? Because it's important that it's not just your tax dollars that you spend locally, but it's how can we bring other money in? So I think all of your concerns are valid. As a member of the select board and just someone in town who supports this, I will look at ways so that it's not just your property taxes that you're paying to Ashland that are supporting and paying for this.
I understand that, but there's also a number of other things which we haven't even touched on that I think are going to take precedence over any trail.
Well, and I would agree.
$10,000, Ashland, that's so many. Well, what do we leave out of the new middle school? What's going to be left off that if we put $10,000 towards a trail? Somebody told me that the high school is not built to last forever. How many years do we have till we need a new high school?
The high school we will have for quite a while yet, so.
I just want to emphasize something. The buckets of money, however much this may feel like sleight of hand, are not really what you're addressing. It is perfectly valid to say, yeah, well, if we do this, then we've got that problem. And what about this, however expensive the public safety building is, or fixing the schools? These are all townwide budgetary considerations, except for the trail. And why do I say that? Because the trail has different buckets of money that have nothing to do with the town budget. I'll make that statement. So where is it coming from? Part of it we're applying to a mass trails grant. It's coming from the state. That's what we're hoping to work on to pay for the engineering we're currently trying to do. Another batch is coming from taxpayer funded dollars out of the CPA fund. Well, the CPA fund, the Community Preservation Act fund, cannot pay to rebuild a school. You can't use those funds. It's come when you pay your property taxes, it goes into these little buckets. So there are certain predefined uses of that money, affordable housing, open space, historical, to preserve certain historical landmarks in the town. And that is, so there are competing interests, but those buckets of money are not competing with fixing the roads or fixing the schools or putting in a public safety building. That's coming from a different area of the town budget. And whether we spend $1 billion on the trail or whether we spend $1, it doesn't have any effect on the rest of the town budget, which might be too high. Property taxes might be too high. There's plenty to talk about, but spending money on the trail is not coming from those places and not competing with the core town expenditures. Well, it doesn't.
Yikes.
Well, I do.
I just want to say one last thing about maybe.
Yeah, let me. Right. So I want to try to wrap it up. But we have some. I'm going to ask Michael to come out and summarize next steps. But Joel has nicely offered to meet again. I see this as really the beginning of the process with you folks, and nothing's cast in stone here. I think there's a number of very valid concerns that have been raised, and we were expecting to hear that. And Joel is, I think you're suggesting offering a site walk and how to contact. So we've got folks' contact information, right? And
go to the committee. I would say,
yeah.
The committee, if you can remember this. If not, we'll try to get an email out to through your management company, I guess. Upper Charles Trail at ashlandmass.com, and we'll get that and we'll respond directly to you. Okay. The other thing, the so-called fear of the unknown. If you haven't been on a trail, if you haven't seen how close the houses are, if you haven't talked to residents who live there and it's really dangerous and this is really bad, or it's not, then there's a real value to getting out on a trail if you're able to walk or ride a bicycle or whatever the modality would be. I would be really encouraging you to, and I'd be happy to meet almost at any time, to go for a short walk, a long walk. There are some sections, if we went down, you could drive right to the trailhead in Milford, also on Route 85. There's a big parking lot there. It's free parking. And you can walk. I mean, there's different parts of the trail have very different characteristics. Some are really out in the middle of nowhere and there's nothing nearby. And others, there's houses right there with, I mean, from the trail to the house is 20 feet. And there's a big stockade fence up that they put up. So anyway, if you're interested in this, Upper Charles Trail at ashlandmass.com, and maybe talk among yourselves and see if you want to have like a little group walk or something.
The other,
sorry, just one.
No, go ahead.
That the fear of the unknown is probably what's bringing up a lot of these questions, but it seems like there's still a lot that you guys still don't know, and so
that's right.
answering those questions and bringing that information to us, and I include myself in that because even though I'm a big fan of trails, but it just seems that there's not enough information for us
That's right.
to provide support or not support. So
yeah.
The next time having more information, more visuals, feasibility studies. I know engineers haven't figured it all out yet, but they or another group could provide some level of information that would help it be a little more clear.
One of the issues that we have, this is, somebody used the phrase cart before the horse or chicken before the egg or whatever they were saying. We have a problem here. You know, one of the things we have not done is sent our engineers tromping around in your neighborhood, you know, with little measuring tapes and little surveying things. That's your property, and we don't do that. So it's very difficult for us to obtain, without the permission of your community, to even go in and do a preliminary feasibility study. We don't even have that.
Right, but there's Google Earth. I mean,
Well, that's what we've done. We have.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. That's a good point. So I think, for those who couldn't hear that, she's talking about more detail on the proposal. I think what we're trying to do here is get you involved early in the process. So before a lot of these questions are answered, there's an actual exact plan. So I think that's part of what we're running up against here, to make sure that people are aware of what's going on and that we're sharing as much, being as transparent as possible and sharing as much information as we know it as the process moves along. So, yes, ma'am, did you have another question?
I was just thinking that even though that I know that not everything is settled, so it seems to me like it's pretty much a done deal. Like, in other words, you're going to come through Pine Lake, no matter what the concerns are.
Well, that's a good point. So her point was that this is a done deal. We're going to go there no matter what. We're still in the process of looking at alternatives. So far, this is the best alternative. We did a brief presentation of the different alternatives. But to get to your point, my feeling is until you actually start dealing with the details, you won't know how viable something is. Things could come up, or there could be issues that we say, well, no, there's better alternatives. So that's why I'd say we're still early in the process. We think this is the best alternative, but maybe once we start doing the technical stuff, that there's other. Someone brought up questions about the intersection and how would that work. So all those things have yet to be addressed. So anyway, that's my take on it, that we're early in the process. Oh, so let's talk about next steps. I'm going to invite Michael up in just a minute, but Joel suggested doing that. I would also suggest to make sure that you have your name and email address there, because my suggestion would be that the Trail Committee proactively get in touch and maybe propose one thing. Maybe a Pine Lake site walk would be a good next step. It's just to actually look physically at what we're talking about, and you could point out the different issues. So that may be one. And then the other one is a field trip to the Milford to look at various specific things. So we've been at this about over an hour and a half. So unless there's other burning questions, I can't wait till our next kind of contact. I'm going to invite Michael up here. Yes.
More brief comment. There's not really political energy in town to take property for this trail. It just isn't really going to happen. The only way the town will gain access to your property is through a mutual consent, an easement. And that will involve some negotiation and, for all I know, a trade. But there is not going to be, I don't think there's anybody that would support taking property for this. So it's definitely not a done deal.
This property of the native now, the Honda just owns the property, and legally it is the Honda is the owner.
Yeah, the association owns it.
Legally, does Honda have to donate this piece of land or to sell this piece of land? And
Well, those are good questions. I don't think we can speak to the legal organization of the association.
Just telling you the town won't take it.
people
Yeah.
living there will clean this piece of trail and close it. What you are going to do? If it's still the property of the Honda, it is legally.
I'm not sure I'm following the concern there. Could someone?
If this moves forward and there's a trail and other people say that move in there after say no, then
Oh.
lose access. But I think there would an agreement would have to
Yes, so that would be part of the agreement, and whatever agreement you would make, presumably people that come after you would be bound by the agreement. So I'm not. But anyway, let me turn this over to Michael. Kind of summarize where we're at and your concerns.
Thank you. I just want to say from my perspective how beneficial this meeting has been. It might not seem that way from your perspective because we don't have visuals and everything like that, but I never would have thought of dogs barking, when people were going by. I never would have thought of, let's look at a trail and make sure that there's not some inadvertent shortcut that people could take. This is all very, very good information. I think at the end of the day, one of us is going to have to take a stab at putting something in front of you for you to react to. And I think what we're trying to do tonight is try to, at least at a conceptual level, figure out how we can make that next conversation as beneficial as possible. Does that make sense?
I think one of the issues, I think I speak for most of us that have concerns with Lindsay. I'm right behind you in age, by the way. I think it's the unknown contingencies that are just, it's a big, big question mark just hanging out in the air. And I think there's as much of that on your end as there perhaps is on ours, maybe different issues. But I think it's this unknown that just seems to loom pretty large.
It is. And
whether it's the intersection or fencing or funding, I just think it's unknown contingencies that could arise at the 11th hour, once this is underway.
Well, I mean, one thing that I've found is that you're never going to be able to anticipate all of the problems. You have to design things, you have to design operations in a way that you can be nimble enough to kind of address some of those things as they happen. And this trail certainly falls within that category. I think, from my perspective, and I don't know if everybody will agree to this, I think what it would be good to do is for us to go back and maybe design or put together a conceptual path for this. I've heard a couple of things that are really, really important. One of the things, I don't know if we've said, explicitly, but your community is one of the better communities I've seen that has been able to actually integrate itself into the natural environment. And that's something that, one of the reasons why you moved there, I think it's safe to say. So any path that we would have, we would want to try to minimize any impact to that as possible. So the things that caused you to move there, we want to minimize any disruption to that, number one. So, and I think that's a fair point. And then I think we're concerned about screening for a number of different reasons. I think you want to create a physical barrier so you don't have to see people and they don't have to see you, and then also keep them from inadvertently coming through. But I think, there's all different alternatives, but I think we would want to look at maybe something a little bit natural as that type of barrier, so that would integrate into the environment as well. We need to do some homework. We need to figure out what other communities have done with like the trash issue. That's a great issue. We need to come up with maybe some like safety protocols, or put together kind of a plan of what that could look like. And then had one more point. I knew I was going to forget it. Funding. Yeah, that's going to be another thing. But also design a conceptual path that is aware of and minimizes the chance for people to go off and develop a shortcut. That was a really good point. And so I think it's going to be incumbent upon us to kind of put that together. Again, it's going to be at a conceptual level. Not going to have schematics or anything, but we could do that as to the best of our ability. And then we can bring that back to you, and you can react to that and let us know, like, okay, this, you might see something there that you hadn't thought of before that could be a concern. And then we can, again, continue that dialogue. I think that would be beneficial. I think this is a marathon, not a sprint. I can't emphasize that enough. We do want to engage you very early in the process so we can have this type of dialogue. The last thing we want to do is go down the road of designing a trail that does not have your input, and then we give you a half-designed trail and you're like, whoa, nobody wants to have that. And the funding stuff, Ken, is a whole other conversation. But needless to say, there's a lot of projects, there's a lot of things going on. We have to decide as a community what we want to do, what we want to be. in the direction we want to go. And that's a conversation that we want to have. It's not specific to the trail. It's to everything else that we're trying to do.
Do you foresee any additional parking needed? And where? And would that
That's at the
Yeah. Yeah, so we do anticipate that there would need to be some additional parking for the trail, not necessarily at Pine Lake. Where the Y is, where the YMCA will be, we're talking to them about a parking lot there that could service the trail, also service the YMCA. We want to try to find locations where you can put parking where it services a lot of different needs and not just necessarily one or two.
Good question.
So, does that sound like a plan moving forward? Okay.
And in
All
the
right.
meantime, please feel free to come to any of our meetings or send us an email that we can get back to you on this. Like, oh, I thought of, we want to hear it. That's the whole point.
Right. And thank you, Valerie, for that presentation. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it on all the effort you've taken. Really appreciate your attitude of looking at this carefully and letting us know your concerns. So thank you very much. And this is, as Michael said, just the beginning. So thank you.